In a world that can feel pretty complex, and let's be honest, kind of dark sometimes, what does it actually mean to be a positive influence? How can just one person's life really stand out and make a difference? Well, today we're going to dig into that very question. We'll be exploring a powerful lesson from the Book of Philippians to really get a handle on this call to be a light in the middle of the night. Okay, so here's our learning route. First, we'll tackle the core idea of shining as lights. Then, we'll look at the dynamic between God's work and our response. After that, we'll see what this life of contrast looks like in the real world, check out some powerful examples of proven character, and finally, wrap up with how this legacy of light keeps going. All right, let's jump right into our first section, the core idea. This is where we're going to unpack the central metaphor that really frames this whole conversation, this call to shine like a light in a world that often feels pretty dim. So this one passage from Philippians really sets the whole stage. It's not just a nice thought, it's a direct challenge. And did you notice that fascinating connection it makes? A life that's free from complaining and arguing is directly tied to becoming a visible, shining light. According to the lesson, that phrase, crooked and perverse generation, isn't just harsh words, it's describing a society that's kind of lost its way. And in that context, the simple but radical act of living with a gracious, unified spirit becomes a really powerful statement. A really powerful way to think about this is used in the lesson. Picture yourself out in the country on a night with no moon, far away from all the city lights. The stars look unbelievably bright, don't they? It's the contrast that makes all the difference. Well, in the same way, the idea here is that the more moral darkness there is in the world, the more clearly and brilliantly a life of integrity and purpose is going to stand out. It's not about being perfect, but about being distinctly different. The power is in its presence against that dark backdrop.
So what's really interesting is how this light is powered. It's not just a matter of gritting your teeth and trying harder. Let's move on and take a look at the internal mechanics, that crucial relationship between God's action and our own human response.
Okay, now let's tackle this phrase that can sometimes be a bit confusing. Work out your own salvation. The key thing the lesson points out is that this has nothing to do with earning salvation. Instead, it's all about the outworking, the process of actively showing, of making visible, the internal change that God has already kicked off inside. You can think of it like this. A coach gives a player a brilliant strategy and gets them in shape to pull it off, but the player still has to actually get on the field and run the plays. It's a team effort.
So here's the crucial distinction, laid out right here. On one side, God works in you. That's the engine room. He provides the desire to do what's right and the power to actually do it. But that's the internal part. Then you've got our part on the other side. We cooperate by working out that internal power through our external choices. When God gives us the will, our part is obedience. When He gives us the power, our part is resisting the urge to do something else. It's a real partnership.
So how does this partnership actually translate into real life? Well, that brings us right to section 3, where we're going to explore the external expression, what this life of stark contrast really looks like day to day.
So these are the key qualities that create that shining contrast. First, blameless. Living with integrity so there's no real reason for anyone to point a finger. Now, harmless is fascinating. The original word means unmixed or pure, which suggests a sincerity with no hidden agendas. Unified ties right back to that starting point about avoiding complaining and arguments. And finally, distinct and grounded, making a conscious choice to walk a different path, based on what the lesson calls the solid foundation of the word of life.
And this quote just brilliantly illustrates the kind of mindset you need to stay harmless or pure in our world today. I mean, we're just saturated with media that isn't always so uplifting. This resolution from the Psalms is actually a super practical guide for right now, making a conscious, proactive decision about what we let influence our minds. It's not about hiding from the world, but about being intentional with our focus to maintain that unmixed character.
Now, this isn't all just theory. The lesson doesn't just throw abstract ideas at us. It gives us tangible, human examples of people who actually lived these things out. So for section 4, let's dive into these case studies of proven character.
First up, we've got Timothy. The Apostle Paul, who wrote this letter, describes him in this really unique way as being like-minded, or as the original language puts it, equal in soul. Now that implies this incredibly deep, shared commitment. It speaks to a unity of purpose that's so rare and so powerful, where two people are driven by the exact same core motivations.
So what made Timothy's character proven? It wasn't just talk. The lesson points out that he shared Paul's deep commitment, he was energetic in his work, and he genuinely cared about other people. But here's the kicker. His character was tested.
In an age where we can all curate our own personal brand, this is a huge distinction. His character was forged in the fire, you might say, and shown to be the real deal not when things were easy, but through tough, real-world trials.
Next, we meet a man named Epaphroditus. He was a messenger from the church in Philippi, and the lesson really paints a picture of a guy who was not afraid to face some serious personal risk for his mission. To really get this, we have to remember what it was like back then. Travel was dangerous, and supporting a controversial prisoner like the Apostle Paul was not exactly a safe thing to do.
Epaphroditus showed his character through his actions. He was a trusted messenger, a vital, practical job that required total integrity. He was a fellow worker, meaning he was getting his hands dirty in the actual day-to-day ministry. And most powerfully, he was called a fellow soldier, which implies he faced real conflict and was willing to risk his own life for the cause. He wasn't on the sidelines. He was right there in the trenches.
The lesson really puts a spotlight on this final instruction about Epaphroditus. Paul tells the church to honor him. And why? It wasn't because of his wealth, or his social status, or his charisma. It was because of his spirit of sacrifice. That is a powerful call for us to think about who we choose to admire and hold up as examples in our own lives.
And just to show that these principles aren't stuck in ancient history, our final section brings us into a much more recent story. The lesson shares the absolutely incredible life of Kata Ragoso, a man whose life became a modern narrative of what it means to be an enduring light.
I mean, his story is just remarkable. Right from his very name, Kata Ragoso, which means no devil strings, his life was symbolic. During World War II, his island was invaded. He was ordered to kill Allied people, and he refused, basically saying he would obey God rather than man. He was put in front of an execution squad and, according to the story, miraculously survived. He then spent the rest of the war leading rescue operations, saving over 200 people. His life is just this powerful, modern example of someone shining as a bright light in the absolute darkest of times.
And so that leaves us with this final crucial question. In our own time, in a world that is just full of artificial lights, social media, celebrity, fleeting trends, what does it really mean to be a genuine one? What does that authentic, positive influence look like in our own lives today? At work, in our families, the way we interact online? What does it mean for you to be a star in the night?